and welcome. You tune into Rush Hour with me, Ankita Saxena. Well, SEBI has ordered Trafiksol ITS Technologies to refund IPO proceeds to investors. Now, BSE will oversee the refund process. My colleague Ankur Mishra is joining in with the details of that story. Over to you, Ankur.
Yes, market regulator SEBI has taken the note of the ongoing series which was done by ET now regarding the SME IPOs, how the retail investors are suffering, and now SEBI has ordered that the investors of Trafiksol IPO should get their refund, and not only refund, this will be done with the full interest. The order says that there were allegations regarding the end use of funds while there was an anonymous complaint which was made against the proceeds of the IPO. The investigations which has been conducted by SEBI has found that yes, the management was aware about the use of the proceedings, and the allegation is that it was done for the proxy firm which was of the same company, that is Trafiksol IPO. Now this IPO was oversubscribed to the tune of 10,000 crore, and what was the issue size? It was only 45 crore. So after that humongous response, there was an anonymous complaint on which SEBI has now acted, and an order has been passed saying that full refund of investors should be given with interest. To understand this news more, we have with us Ashwin Parekh. Mr. Parekh, welcome to ET Now. You would have seen the order which has been passed by SEBI. What is the underlying message here?
Well, you see, I mean, we've been seeing that there is a certain order of, particularly in case of these smaller issues, that there is a particular, I mean, only because the regulations went to the extent of supporting, mid-size and small-size enterprises to really go to the markets to raise their funds. I mean, it was not thought that the whole platform would be used or misused by some of these entities to the extent this has now come to light too, for example. So, I mean, here, for example, we see that because the disclosure required for such IPOs is less than the normal IPOs. So therefore, to that extent, let's say the disclosure arising on some material facts, including the fact that the IPO proceeds had to be used for the purchase of a solution. Initially, it had said that it was going to purchase that from a third-party vendor. Investigation, as you pointed out, has now suggested that they were going to buy it from one of their own organizations. This complete misuse of public money, basically. So, and it's clear, and I commend, in fact, SEBI and BSE, first to BSE and then SEBI, in stepping into this and saying that the entire IPO proceeds should be refunded with interest to the investors. We have seen that in case of some of these small size issuances, the amount of irregularities or the non-disclosure that has been happening, has really affected the sentiments of the investors very badly. So this is a very right move in its correct direction, I would say.
It seems a right move, but if you see the order, the DRHP said something, the company did something. Now, only after the complaint was there, SEBI acted on that. I want to understand as a process, while there are a few of the details which are given in DRHP, but if the company doesn't do like it has happened in the case of Trafiksol IPO, what are the options for SEBI, and do they actually judge each of the companies separately?
Well, actually, you see, this is a very interesting question. See, if I look at the entire IPO process, for example, it's not just the company. There are several other service providers who are associated with the IPO, including the merchant bankers, the auditors who certify, the financials. Then thereafter, let's say the parties who verify, these documents and then submit it to the authority, to SEBI, to the exchanges for listing. Now, all these intermediaries, I mean, they must be really hauled up, to my mind. SEBI must really investigate and find out whether they are doing their sort of, duty, their responsibilities properly or otherwise. Because you have retail investors on hand, over here, their interest to be protected. So I would say it's not just the promoters. I would say everybody associated with the IPO. I mean, the merchant bankers, the intermediaries, anybody, I mean, including even the chartered accountants who certified, let's say, some of the financials or the disclosures. they must be investigated. They must be asked to explain why they did not really disclose this material fact, that the party itself, it was almost like a self-owned organization, and therefore the monies were actually getting siphoned into their own organization in a different manner.
And let's look at few of the statistics which we have. This IPO particularly was for 45 crore. How much bids came? Rupees 10,000 crore. So it was a humongous oversubscription, and also investors made money. But now when the investigation is done, there was a kind of fraudulent activity. That is what the allegation says. For investors who has actually lost out money technically, even if they get with interest, how should they view this IPO?
This is a very serious question. You see, I'll tell you, there are two sets of investors who will now get involved. One is those who participated in the IPO. And then, of course, some of them may have already liquidated their positions and they may have really gained out of it or whatever. Let's say, and then there are now the others who are sitting on that equity. I would suggest, I would see, that the real fairness would prevail if whoever is going to incur any loss arising out of this entire involvement, the promoter should be made to compensate that quite clearly,
Definitely fair point, but SEBI has also mentioned various times that they are overhauling the overall SME IPO process. Where do you think is the deficiency lies?
Well, I would say, I'll tell you, there are two things about this entire regulation. The purpose of the new set of regulations for the MSME, SME kind of, let's say, issuances was to make sure that the cost of issuance, should not be overwhelming. It should not really impact the small organizations borrowing from the market or taking their equity to the market. And that was a very noble purpose, let's say. What seems to have happened is that the organizations who are going to the market are getting it all wrong. They believe that this becomes a way in which they can really either keep their investors in dark by not adequate disclosure, only because the regulation requirements for the disclosure are a little sort of, reduced compared to the normal IPOs. It does not mean that people should take an advantage of that. I suppose what may happen is a new set of disclosure parameters, will have to be evolved. And I suppose more amount of certification from different agencies will have to be called for to give some amount of comfort both to the exchanges as well as to the investors on the other side, basically.
Last question I would like to ask you, what is the first and foremost requirement? SEBI should reduce number of IPOs which has already happened with the kind of initiatives which has been done, or should look at the process itself?
So you see, I'll tell you, I would say either it's a two-way kind of a responsibility. Either we can put a lot of responsibility on the exchanges and therefore through the exchanges to the regulator, for example. Or on the other hand, we put a lot of, let's say, that responsibility to the promoters and to the intermediaries. My answer would be, it should be the second one. Because if, let's say, the person who's really going to the market, only because the disclosure requirements are less, does not keep material facts, does not inform the investors of the material facts, then, I would say it should really go beyond just a civil crime. It would be criminal. Quite honestly, to take such monies from retail investors, and in this particular case is really highlighting a complete misuse of funds, basically, So should we stop at just considering it as a financial kind of liability, or should we extend that liability to more than that? In this particular case, let's not forget, interest has already been included, which means the investors will have to be paid interest in addition to, let's say, the principal amount. But I would say it could be extended further.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parekh, for joining at this hour. And while the investigations and the kind of survey and opinion of investors has been brought by ET now, it is definitely a first step which is taken by SEBI, but not just bandage. It needs a deep surgery.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.